The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Good afternoon and welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting from Toronto, Ontario, Canada on Reality Radio 101. And now, your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be back with you here again today. As you know, this is our New Year's stress reset. And because it's December the 29th, and really we're moving into the New Year's, it's kind of exciting. Usually a lot of people are, I guess, actually a little bit more stressed because we know that even good things that we're looking forward to, that we're excited about, can actually, leave us feeling a little bit more depleted than we expect. So the exciting thing today is we have a stress specialist. She is a naturopath and she's also an author and a speaker. And she wrote a book called Master Your Stress, Reset Your Health. And it walks through identifying unique types of stress and different ways of combating those stress reactions. I shouldn't even use the word combat, but you get the idea. We're trying to come up with various approaches to really address what is happening when we feel overwhelmed in our bodies and our minds, whether, we've had a late night or we're looking forward to New Year's and we know that it's going to be, a lot of things going on. Maybe we're a little socially anxious, or maybe, we just are so excited about something coming up. All these things can create stress. And also the other thing that can create stress is our idea of what we want to put in place when we think about the new year. Maybe you have goals for yourself and you're not sure if you can actually make them come to light, or, you're overwhelmed with the demands of everything on your plate for 2023. I mean, that's understandable as well. Well, Dr. Doni has some solutions for all of that. I'm pretty excited to hear what she has to say. I'm really, really pleased that you're here with us today. And I want to just welcome you because today is pre-recorded. We are not taking any live questions, but I have a lot for you because I find this topic actually really, really interesting. And because it's a different kind of approach, we're not talking about strictly psychological ways of dealing with stress. We're talking about ways to reinforce the way our bodies can feel healthy and resilient using all sorts of alternative strategies. So welcome, Dr. Doni, and thank you for sharing your Master Your Stress, Reset Your Health book with all of us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's really lovely, and I'm glad we'll be able to get into the material in your book, but also hear what kinds of stories you have about successes in getting people to reset their health. Now, I want to actually start with you because I know you have an interesting story as well. And I know that it really kind of brought you to a deeper understanding of how important stress is in helping yourself manage stress and the demands of your work and your life and, your personal life. So maybe if you wouldn't mind helping our listeners by telling us a little bit about how you realized that dealing with your stress. And I know that one of the stress struggles that you were having was with migraines and I believe sleep as well. And you were able to clear up some of those things. Maybe you can start by telling us a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. I struggled with migraines for like 20 years. I was getting migraines once or twice a month, and these were migraines that would just take me out. Like, and no matter what I tried, I could, even if I took a medication, and I mean, sometimes I couldn't even swallow anything because the pain was so severe that I just had to get through it. And through having those migraines, it really pushed me to think differently, to think like, why am I getting these migraines? What do I have to do to change what's going on in my body so that my body doesn't have to have a migraine in order for me to take a break, essentially. I realized one day as I was laying there with a migraine, I'm like, you know what? What if I just take a break on purpose intentionally, take a day off or a half a day off, and then maybe my body doesn't have to create a migraine in order for me to finally take a day off. And so I started to really have these thoughts of like, how do I outsmart these migraines really? How do I figure it out? And it was through that process, as well as just helping my patients. I graduated from Bastyr University in the year 2000 and moved to Manhattan in 2001, right after 9/11. And so all of my patients were under severe stress. And so it was a matter of also figuring out, how can I help my patients to recover from severe stress and thrive in their lives? And so that's what really drove me to start testing. I started looking at cortisol levels, neurotransmitter levels, adrenaline levels, and how can I solve this for all of us so that we can be healthy, even though stress is going to happen in our lives.
Wow. Okay, that is a really big story, Dr. Doni. We have a common thread here because I also graduated right around the same time, and I published my first book right after 9/11 as well. And it was all about post-traumatic stress and recovery, and really, using a triphasic model to deal with the impact of stress. And I had spoken to a lot of people who had really been devastated by the events of 9/11. And just, it was just a big part of my early years in my practice, and talking about resiliency and how you really had to kind of work with strategies to stabilize your physiological well-being, like, working with strategies to, change our internal thoughts, but also change the way our bodies were breathing, and be very intentional about that, and work with stabilization exercises. So I could never, even at the very beginning of my career, separate the body from the mind. And I notice in your Master Your Stress, Reset Your Health, you also really add that piece to it, that we're really not separate. Our bodies and our minds are not separate, and they shouldn't be treated like separate things. And, I think there was a real evolution that started to happen about 20 years ago when I was graduating and you were graduating, and it became really apparent that, we really had to treat ourselves as whole beings, and understand that, what we think and what happens in our bodies are very, very much connected. I really resonated with that part of your book. And I liked how many different tools you were using to address stress, which is actually really normal. Stress is actually normal. We're supposed to have some stress. Like, for example, I think that having a little stress in life is actually a good thing. I mean, it's what gets me to, go and exercise, or, do the things I need to do to take care of myself. Otherwise I'll just lie on the couch and watch videos, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this was some of my original research. I'm also trained as a midwife, and in my midwifery training, what I researched was stress for women in labor. And what I saw is that we need a certain amount of stress for labor to work well. Like, our physiology actually needs these stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, to be working at a certain amount to even signal our normal body processes. So I definitely love to right away put out the conception that we're supposed to be stress-free. It's not about being stress-free. It's how do we get an optimal stress response, an optimal amount of stress hormones, because it's the women who have an optimal cortisol and adrenaline where labor progresses the most efficiently and with the fewest complications. If cortisol and adrenaline is too high, or if cortisol and adrenaline is too low, then labor stops. And so I just look at it as labor is such a perfect example for us of this is how our body and mind, you're right, in the book I say, hey, if I'm saying the word body, what I really mean is your body and mind as an interconnected system. Even if I use the word body, I'm always implying that we're also talking about our mind, our spirit, our emotions, all as one whole. And the more we can understand that as humans, we have a built-in stress response system and we have a built-in stress recovery system. It's just that what tends to happen in our stressful lives is we tend to get stuck in the stress response and we aren't giving our bodies enough stress recovery. And so things get out of balance and get stuck there over long periods of time. And that's when health issues start to develop.
Yeah, I noticed that you have a really interesting system, which seems to kind of lay out a plan. Obviously, it's simplified to make it easy to uptake, but I'm sure that some people have to work harder on one area or another. And, you talk about your CARE program, which is an acronym for clean eating, adequate sleep, recovery, and exercise. And I wonder if you just talk a little bit about those 4 components. And then I want to pivot back actually to adrenaline and cortisol when we finish this.
Sure, of course. It's the thing is that I kept finding myself when I'm reading the research and then translating it to clinical care, because I've been seeing patients for 22 years, helping, how do I help patients to implement this? And so in the blogs I write and the articles and the presentations I give, I kept finding myself coming back to these same foundational things that we can do to help us stay healthy while stressed. And one day I realized that it fit with the acronym CARE. So clean eating is really the area where we can realize that what we feed ourselves and what we don't feed ourselves has an effect on how we respond and recover from stress, and that we can intentionally choose the foods we're swallowing in a way that we can be supporting ourselves and decreasing our stress exposure.
Except, of course, if you're in a position where you hang out with a bunch of women once a week and play games, and out comes the chips and the sweets and all that stuff, and it's like, boy, it's hard to resist.
Well, that's where I love, if say when I have a group of friends, we're already more aware of hey, we want to have fun still, but does that really have to mean that we're having high sugar, high inflammatory foods? What if we just choose to have green tea and make gluten-free, dairy-free things to eat and have high protein? And there's so many yummy things we can eat that don't have to raise our blood sugar or cause inflammation. So we can still have fun even while eating healthy. And so that's where I tend to go. But yes, it's true. I mean, it's not that it's about perfection either. There's going to be times where I go to an event and it's not going to be gluten-free and sugar-free, but I'm still going to go and enjoy myself. And it's a matter of then choosing, how do we, if we know we get exposed to foods that are not are healthiest for us, then how do we help ourselves recover on the other side of it? So it's always a matter of being aware and choosing carefully so you can get the recovery that you need after those exposures.
I guess, and with because we're talking, it's November the 30th, but
Yes.
The reality is that, when this airs, it's going to be December the 29th, and people will have already eaten like a ton of stuff and gone to a ton of parties. So I guess, for me, it seems more realistic to realize that I'm absolutely going to have junk food, and I'm going to partake in cake, and I'm going to eat chips, and I'm going to do stuff. Generally, I have a really, really healthy diet. But what happens when we're indulging in all this stuff? What can we expect happens to our bodies in these, hyper, exciting party times, because I like to go out and I like to hang out with my friends, and I like to hang out, with people that are enjoyable to talk about. It tends to be fun, but I also know myself well enough that, well, I'm definitely going to have some of that. So how do we recover?
Yeah, it's such a great point. And part of it is noticing. I encourage anyone listening to think about, how do you feel after an event like that? Do you wake up the next morning feeling tired, feeling kind of water retention and headachy and foggy? And then you can kind of put together, oh yes, it was maybe what I ate or drank that is now affecting the way I feel the next day. Because I feel like the more we have awareness for that, then that shifts our choices going forward. And it's never about feeling critical of yourself. I'm always like, let's be compassionate for ourselves. Like you're saying, we're going to be human. We're going to have fun. We're going to be exposed to things. So what do we do to gently support ourselves on the other side? One thing for sure is hydration. I see you drinking your water. Yeah, have water and put electrolytes in there. You can even use sea salt, a pinch of sea salt in your glass of water to get electrolytes, because when we're hydrated, then that helps our body clear out inflammation and toxins. Then also I would, on the next day, I would say, hey, let me make sure I'm having protein with every meal. I mean, I do that all the time anyway, but kind of come back to, if you know your blood sugar got thrown off, the best way to get your blood sugar back on track again is to say, let me make sure every time I sit down and eat that there's some protein, whether that's animal protein or a plant-based protein, but you want to have protein with every meal. And so even just hydration and getting protein with every meal is going to help you stabilize. I also like to use digestive enzymes. So if you have pancreatic enzymes, you can take pancreatic enzymes at the time that you're eating something that you know is outside of their usual diet, and definitely the days after, to help you digest your food better. When you digest your food better, it's less likely to trigger inflammation.
So are you saying, like, if people think that they're going to go to some, a bunch of parties, or, if they need to reset, if they can buy something like you called it a pancreatic enzyme. So what kinds of things would they get? Obviously, they'd go to a health food store and pick up something.
Yeah, most health food stores will have pancreatic enzymes, and the way you can identify it easily is on the label. The ingredients end with A's, ASE. So there's protease, ASE, which is for digesting protein, and then there's amylase, which is for digesting carbohydrates, and lipase helps digest fats. So I usually would not choose one that includes hydrochloric acid, which is stomach acid, only because some people don't need that. But pancreatic enzymes are very gentle, and most everybody can benefit from them, and they're not going to be harmful. So I feel like it's a safe place to start and say, hey, let me help myself digest my food better. Again, when the food is better digested, even these proteases can help digest dairy protein and gluten protein. So if you're getting exposed to these inflammatory foods, at least you're digesting them better. When they're digested, they're less likely to trigger inflammation.
So that's really interesting, because so this relates to gut health as well, because many of the clients that I work with, and many of our listeners on this show as well, really relate to stress. We have a lot of professionals who listen to our show as well, and they also deal with a lot of patients or clients who have experienced significant stress or depression. And when you have significant stress or depression, you often hear about problems with digestion or gut issues, and people talk about not digesting well, always having this feeling of bloating or discomfort. And then to add the holiday season into it, and all the strange foods we might eat, this idea of adding a digestive enzyme, may really make a big difference for people, even if it's after the fact. Even if they're listening to it today, and they went to all their parties last week, they still may have something coming up for New Year's. Go out and buy that digestive enzyme at your local health food store. I'm sure the staff there would have lots of ideas about the right kind of things to take. And I'm sure there are products on the market that are high quality that would make a difference and, help with managing all of that as well. And you also said, drink water the next day, or, what other kinds of things might a person do to help themselves with, that kind of overindulgence after the holidays, or, just before New Year's?
Well, definitely just I think of it almost like as if when you have a cold, we know, okay, I need more rest. Maybe I need a hot shower. Maybe I need to just eat food that's easy to digest, like a chicken soup or something, or turkey soup, So give yourself that space, like that recovery day where you can eat food that's easy to digest, take a bath or shower, take an extra nap, maybe go for a gentle walk out in nature. So you're helping your body reset. Our bodies are very responsive to our environment in terms of the sounds, the colors, the light and darkness. And so just think about it as, how do I help my body know how to reset based on nature even? It's so amazing how our nervous system responds to nature. So I like to use nature a lot that way.
Wow, that's a really great suggestion too, especially if you're already feeling a little bit your body's tired and feeling unsettled. As soon as you get outside and you start breathing fresh air, even if you're in the city, if you go for a long walk and you just try to let your body settle, it could make such a huge difference. I mean, there's lots of simple things we can do. And if you can't get outside, I mean, even walking inside of your own home, or I think you had mentioned something about climbing stairs. In your book.
You can also look at pictures of nature from inside, like anything that is even visually showing yourself trees and ocean, and our nervous system takes that in. Even if it's not the actual ocean right in front of us, our nervous system sees it on a picture and takes it in that way. Or the sounds, you can also play music that's soothing, right? So this is why these things exist, is because over time research and people realized, wow, music helps us, quiet helps us. Also, of course, breath work, or if you like meditation, you can do that. These are things that all help your cortisol and adrenaline reset, and it just helps your whole system to reset as well.
So let's actually go back to cortisol and adrenaline for a moment, because and just generally our nervous system, how everything can get so aggravated when we're exposed to stressors, but really not even just stressors in the moment. Anything can throw us off. A person may end up having an old history of trauma, like many of my clients and many of my listeners also have experienced extreme stress in their life, whether from their childhood or something more recent. What can happen is the past can pour into the present. So even if we're not experiencing anything stressful in this very, very precise moment, let's say we go to a party with a lot of people and it's really loud, or we see somebody that frightens us, it can reignite our history of being exposed to something traumatic in our background. It can actually reignite our fight or flight. And then we get a cortisol dump and we get an adrenaline dump. And, we know that the way cortisol and adrenaline work, adrenaline is going to give us a hit. It's going to be a short, powerful hit. But then that cortisol is like bang, 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 bang. And it's really, really hard to turn that off. So maybe you can help us better understand from your perspective, from that naturopathic perspective, what's happening with adrenaline and cortisol and how it is undermining or actually helping us at times.
I mean, you're making such a good point where sometimes just even if we're around certain family dynamics, or even someone says something that just happens to re-trigger a stress response in us, that fight or flight response can happen right out of nowhere. And sometimes it can surprise us. It happens to me too, where I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And so just understanding what's going on in your body can help you so that it doesn't feel so scary. Because of course, as soon as we feel afraid of the stress response, then it creates more stress. So I want you to be able to go, oh, okay, this is my fight or flight response. So when even if just the alarm goes off, sometimes you get an adrenaline response. So the fight or flight is our first initial stress response. And the fight or flight response right away is going to get your blood pumping, so you can feel your heart racing, you might feel sweaty, you might feel your mind racing, and this is we want that human response to happen to protect us if something dangerous is happening, right? So acknowledge, oh, my body thinks something dangerous is happening and it needs to protect me. That's why I'm feeling this way. And so then you can almost talk to your body and yourself and say, okay, actually there's maybe right now there isn't anything dangerous. I can calm myself back down again. Or if there is something dangerous happen, you need to get out of this situation, you can say, okay, I'm going to use this stress response to help me say I need to leave now and go find some space for myself. So as you understand that adrenaline response, then you know how you can work with it and listen to your body. So what happens after that initial fight or flight response is our brain tells our adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are above the kidneys, so they're way down here in your back. And the adrenal glands make cortisol and also adrenaline. And so if the brain says, hey, adrenal glands, we need some more cortisol and adrenaline around here, then that cortisol and adrenaline starts pumping out again as a secondary stress response. And this cortisol, it turns off the digestion, because when we're responding to a stress, we don't really need to digest, right? The body's going to prioritize for us. It's going to say, well, let's wait on the digestion, let's wait on hormones and reproductive activity. So it's going to turn off even ovarian and testicular hormones. It's going to shift your blood sugar up because it knows that we need blood sugar in order to respond to a stress. And it's going to shift our immune function and our nervous system in such a way where we're ready to respond. And that's all healthy and good if you're in the moment responding to a stress, right? So you go, okay, maybe that's why when you're feeling stressed, maybe your appetite is lower, or you're more likely to get reflux or bloating because your digestion is getting the off signal from your stress system. And you're like, well, why do I feel nauseous or low appetite? Well, it's because your stress response system is telling your digestion to wait till later. And so the problem becomes if we are constantly in that cortisol adrenaline response, then our digestion never gets a chance to digest and absorb nutrients, or our hormones and our immune system and nervous system never get a chance to do their healthy thing. And so what we want to know is that there's a healthy stress response, but it's by making sure we get this stress recovery that we can actually help our bodies get both sides of this, right? It's about a balance. And I think sometimes balance is a hard concept for us humans. We tend to think of things as black and white, or, good and bad. And when it comes to stress, it's about how do we have a balance? How do we honor and acknowledge and appreciate a stress response, but how do we also support our stress recovery so that we can keep things in balance?
I'm a big fan of daily practices. And, although I don't do something every single day, most of the time I'll get up in the morning and I do yoga, or I lift weights, or go for a run, or, do something, go for a walk, meditate. I don't think I could do my job with all the complicated elements of it unless I was doing something really regularly. So I like this idea of recognizing, that, our bodies are pretty complicated and they need time to rest and heal. And if we're doing something really regularly, we're going to have a much better chance of tolerating the daily demands, and even tolerating when things are a little bit, offside, and life is always going to do that. It's always going to deliver something weird and unique. And it's like, when we've got practices that we do every single day, we tend to do better overall. I want to go back to the issue around poor digestion when we're stressed. I have a lot of clients who really, really struggle with poor digestion. And I've heard the term leaky gut, and I noticed it was in your book as well. I wonder if you would help us to understand from your perspective what leaky gut is and what people are supposed to do about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, the gut-brain axis is so important. And there's a ton of research on this connection between stress and gut, and how our gut can become a stress to our nervous system or our brain and our experience in our life. So yes, I really do emphasize that healing the gut health or the digestion is so important. And this thing called leaky gut, or in the research it's referred to as intestinal permeability, it refers to the cells that line the intestine. So, because a lot of people will say, well, is this like having loose stool, or what is leaky gut, right? And it's nothing to do with the stool. It's to do with, if you think of your intestines as a tube, right, from your mouth all the way to the other end is a long tube. And what are the walls of the tube made up of? They're made up of little cells all lined up next to each other to make the walls of the tube. And those cells, our body turns them over every few days, just like the skin cells, right? We slough off our skin and we grow new skin and we don't even realize it. Same with the intestinal cells. We're always constantly growing new intestinal cells. But the thing is that these intestinal cells are very responsive to stress exposure. And this is not just psycho-emotional stress. They are also very sensitive to physical stress, like an injury. They're very sensitive to substances that are stressful, like alcohol and caffeine or coffee. Pesticides also in food, these cells are very sensitive to. So if we're obviously going to be exposed to some of these things all the time, it's going to impede the ability of these cells to replace themselves. And it's on a microscopic level that these cells become not as healthy as they could be. So even if you do an endoscopy, they can't really see this. If they do a biopsy and it's really severe, they could see it. But I would say that most all of us have some degree of leakiness in our intestinal lining, whether mild, moderate, or severe, based on our various different exposures to stress and toxins. And when these cells are not as healthy as they could be, what's happening is the food that's coming through, right? We eat the food, we chew it, we swallow it. We're hoping our pancreatic enzymes are going to be there to digest it. But when it's leaky, the food particles can get between the cells. Instead, what should happen is the food should get digested into nutrients, and then the nutrients go through the cells. That's how we get our nutrients from our food, is it has to get digested, and the nutrients go right through the cells. The cells only let digested nutrients through. But if it's leaky, now undigested food particles can get between the cells. And when that happens, see, our immune system is sitting right on the other side, ready to protect us, right? It's ready to protect us from viruses and bacteria. So if the undigested food gets through, our immune system thinks it's something foreign it needs to protect us from. And so our immune system actually starts protecting us from our food, even if it's a healthy food, even if it's a banana or an avocado. If it's not getting digested and it's leaking through, now we're getting an inflammatory response to this healthy food. So we're not even benefiting from the healthy food. And so this is where leaky gut can lead to inflammation that can spread throughout our bodies and affect our nervous system. It can affect everything, is what the research is showing us.
What kinds of things might people feel if they have this intestinal permeability or leaky gut?
Well, some of the most common symptoms is even anxiety, depression, decreased memory, sleep issues. So it can be showing up in those ways. It can also show up as joint pain or water retention or weight gain, or even sinus congestion. And sometimes it even shows up as, like for women, menstrual irregularities. So it can show up a lot of different ways. Autoimmunity is also associated. So if someone has an autoimmune condition, I would definitely be thinking, oh, is there leaky gut that we need to address?
So how would people figure that out if it is an issue? I know that you have a lot of tests and things like that you have linked to your website, and I know people listening will be curious to understand, what are the ways in which we can get more definitive understanding. You have some kind of yes or no, fill in the blanks kind of questionnaires, but what if people want to go a little bit further and have some more definitive testing? What ways in which they could actually figure out, is this a problem for me? Or going back to one other thing, you have these 5 kind of stress characters that we should talk about as well. but I think that this whole thing about the intestinal permeability is a real big piece of it that might give people a better understanding of where they lie in those 5 characters. So let's figure out the testing and the leaky gut first, and then go back to your 5 characters.
Okay. Yes, the thing is that this testing is not, it doesn't show. Leaky gut's not going to show on a regular blood test. It's not going to show on a physical exam. And as I mentioned, it's not even going to show on an endoscopy. So something you're going to hear about when you go to a regular doctor's visit. If you want to know about leaky gut, there are tests, specialty tests that exist. And the different labs and scientists are coming up with new ways all the time to try to identify leaky gut. It's just that some of the tests I find are not as accurate as I would like them to be yet. I mean, I'm anticipating that in the near future, they're going to get even better. What I find clinically, because I've been assessing for leaky gut for over 20 years, so what I find, and I try out every different test and I use them clinically and on myself, what I find right now is my best way to identify leaky gut is with a highly sensitive food sensitivity test, which is testing for 2 different antibodies. It's not looking for IgE antibodies. Usually when people are thinking about food reactions, they think about IgE, which is the antibody that triggers classic allergy responses. So say someone who's allergic to peanuts. But yes, those could be helpful tests if you think you might have an allergy to a food. But what I'm looking at are 2 different antibodies. One is called IgG, and the other one is IgA. These are just the ways we name these delayed response antibodies. And what we see in the research and what I see clinically is when I test a patient for IgA and IgG antibodies, what I'm looking at is their food leaking through and triggering an immune response, an antibody response? If I see, yes, their immune system is trying to protect them from their food, that tells me that it's leaky. That's the definition of leaky gut. And so I use a food sensitivity panel in order to identify leaky gut and the severity of leaky gut. And because then once we can say, oh yeah, we see the signs of leaky gut, you're reacting, your immune system's protecting you from your food, then we can go into action of healing leaky gut, which is avoiding the foods that are causing it and starting to provide the nutrients and herbs that can help our body, because there actually are herbs and nutrients that help our cells, our body catch up and make these healthy cells so we can get ahead of the leaky gut situation. And as the leaky gut heals and we can maintain it over time, that's going to help us to minimize inflammation in our body and help our bodies to be more resilient to stress.
People might be interested in how to find you or find out more information about you. And I'm just going to mention right now that, if you're interested in Dr. Doni Wilson's work, you could just go to our website, Dr. Doni, that's the full DoctorDoni.com, or just, search for Master Your Stress, Reset Your Health. And Dr. Doni can help you with some of these things that she's just mentioned, particularly, if you're interested in, inflammatory processes in the gut, or you're really struggling with that as, part of, what you want to work on in the new year. If 2023 is the year where you're not going to have stomach problems, then this might be something that is of interest to you, reading the book, but also maybe getting some more clarity in terms of those tests, the IgG and IgA, and maybe having a better sense of whether there's intestinal permeability as part of, some gastro discomfort. And I just can't tell you how many people that I speak with who tell me about stomach discomfort as a regular part of their struggles. And I mean, like I said, in a lot of cases, I'm dealing with people who have very considerable trauma in their background, or deal with stress, depression, and, it's bad enough that they've dealt with something really, really difficult in their life. Now they're also dealing with, gastrointestinal discomfort. So, this might be something to really consider as part of your, 2023 New Year's stress reset.
And it makes so much sense, right? Like, so we have the stress and the trauma, even from way back in our lives. It's disrupting the cortisol, which disrupts the digestion. It causes leaky gut, but it also causes imbalance of the gut bacteria, the microbiome. And that's another key area that we can do so much to help it heal. So I always feel like someone who's been really struggling, what I want you to hear is that there's a lot we can do to help your body heal. You can heal leaky gut. We can rebalance your gut microbiome. Now we have a specialty tests to measure the gut bacteria, and I've developed processes to help get those bacteria back on track again, because we know from the research, when we have a good balance of gut bacteria, that also helps us with our health in general and with our neurotransmitters, because a couple of the neurotransmitters are actually made in the gut, right? Serotonin and GABA are mostly made in the gut. So I love that you're identifying this, that the more we heal our gut, the more it helps our mood and our stress recovery. I think that's so amazing.
Yeah, and it's a real big burden. So knowing that there are real strategies to work with this that go beyond, the psychological. I mean, I deal with the psychological component, but I think we're whole people, and we have to throw everything at it if we're really suffering. But you've come up with 5 types of responses. It's really 5 stress types that get ignited or reignited with adrenaline and cortisol, and you call them the night owl, the stress magnet, blah and blue, tired and wired, and sluggish and stressed. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about that. And I had sent you just at the back end, I had been corresponding with you by email and filled out these forms. I can't remember what my type was, but I noticed as I was going through the questionnaire that you put out that some of the questions were a little difficult for me to answer because they didn't entirely fit my experience. And for people who are going to want to fill out that stress questionnaire that you have, I mean, maybe we could just refer to that as, reflect on a time when you've really not been doing as well. That's how you explained it to me. And that made a lot of sense, that when you're filling out that stress questionnaire, if people want to get access to that, you go to drdoni.com for her website, and you'll be able to get access to that. But the idea is, if you're filling that out, really think about a time where, you've been really noticing stress is impeding you. So let's talk a little bit about these 5 types and what people should know about them.
So I started researching cortisol and adrenaline levels and neurotransmitter levels back, 20 years ago, when I started researching stress and recovery. And I started looking for patterns, because it's well established in the research that our cortisol and adrenaline levels become not as optimal when we're exposed to stress as humans. But what wasn't clear for me clinically was, how am I going to help my patients with that? In order to help my patients with that, I need to know, for the person sitting in front of me, is their cortisol too high or too low? Is their adrenaline too high or too low? Because the treatment's different, right? If I give a treatment to, say someone has high cortisol, but I don't know that, and I give them treatment to raise their cortisol more, that's going to work against them, right? So I'm like, no, I need to know, where is my patient when I'm starting? So I'm giving them the right self-care activities, let alone the right nutrients and herbs to help them get their cortisol and adrenaline back to optimal. So what I did is I reviewed over 100. I mean, really, I've reviewed now thousands of test results, but I did a study on 127 patients to identify what are the common patterns. What's really going on? Do people mostly have high cortisol? Do people mostly have high adrenaline? What is it? Because I think that most people who are exposed to stress assume that they have high cortisol. But what I found in my research is that that's not the case. That some people do have high cortisol, and they might have high adrenaline, or they might have low adrenaline. And then another person might have low cortisol, and that person might have high or low adrenaline. And so by identifying these patterns is how I identified the 5 stress types. And so this way we can first know what is your stress type. Is your cortisol high or low? Is your adrenaline high or low? And then based on that, then I can guide you to take the right nutrients, the right herbs in the right sequence, as well as how to implement the self-care in such a way that you're going to be most likely to benefit from your stress recovery.
Oh, wow. That is really, really interesting, because it sounds like you're really giving people a customized approach so that you are delivering, what it is that they can use to really stabilize, to feel resilient, to get stronger again, to be boosted in the ways they need, rather than just kind of guessing and, giving them whatever you think might be useful, but isn't necessarily for them. So that's fantastic. You also talk about, overcoming exhaustion and fatigue and clearing up brain fog. And I'm interested in both of those things as well, because boy, I can tell you a lot of people that I work with struggle with their sleep, feel tired, and have this experience of just not being mentally clear.
Definitely. And the way I think about it is that a lot of it to me comes back to our cortisol levels. We know that when, as humans, if our cortisol is too high for a certain time of day or too low, both of those are related to low energy, low mood, even anxiety, brain fog. And so if those symptoms can occur with either high or low cortisol, it's when we actually identify whether your cortisol is too high or low at different times of day. So to do that, by the way, we can do testing. Again, this is not the standard testing in the regular lab or the regular doctor's office, but you can measure your cortisol at different times of day, usually we do it in urine or saliva, and you collect a sample when you first wake up in the morning, the middle of the day, the evening, and bedtime. And so we can see now in a healthy situation, cortisol goes up in the morning. So it's not high, but it's higher in the morning. And then it's gradually decreasing through the day. So it's lowest before we go to sleep. And so if we look at that healthy cortisol curve, and then we look at what are your levels at 4 different times of day, we can see, is your cortisol higher than it should be in the morning, for example, or is it lower than it should be? And then based on that, we know based on research which herbs and nutrients to help correct that situation. We know which herbs are better at lowering cortisol that's too high. For example, we know that ashwagandha is good at lowering cortisol that's too high, and a nutrient called phosphatidylserine is good at lowering cortisol that's too high. Whereas if cortisol is too low, we're going to use different herbs that are known to increase it, like herbal licorice is known to increase cortisol that's too low. I wouldn't give herbal licorice to a person who has high cortisol, you see? So I'm going to be looking at those levels, those test results, and then as we get your cortisol back to optimal levels, then people experience better energy, better mood, better focus, and better sleep. Some people, it's that their cortisol is too high at night. This is classic for the night owl stress type. And of course, they're not going to sleep well because the cortisol is telling their system that it's supposed to be awake. Like, no, we need to reset this circadian rhythm and help your body get the right signals. Oh no, it's time for the cortisol to be low at night so that we can actually go to sleep and benefit from our sleep. And that's even just one piece of the equation. There's the adrenaline that we can optimize. And then I also have always been doing work with amino acid therapy to re-optimize neurotransmitter levels too. So I look at, is the serotonin too low? Then let's use the precursor nutrient to increase our serotonin. Is our GABA too low? Let's work on raising our GABA. But what I found is it's only when I was able to really optimize the serotonin and GABA along with the cortisol and adrenaline, that's when patients get the most benefit from this protocol.
Wow, that's really interesting. So you're going back to testing, and actually I really like that because it sounds like it really gives you a very deeply personalized approach. And I mean, although in your book you talk about a personalized approach, without those tests, it's really hard to be as precise as possible, because, you know, you make a lot of suggestions in the book about different ways to work with people, and different phases of recovery for different stress types. But it sounds like these extra investigatory processes can be really, really helpful. And I know in your book, you know, you talk about a lot of things, you know, different multivitamins and, you know, vitamin D and omega and magnesium, CoQ10 and collagen, protein shakes, all of these things. But unless you're really knowing what's going on, you know, it might not be a fulsome approach. And, you know, so again, I'm just going to say that if people are interested in the very precise approach that Dr. Doni has to offer, go to drdoni.com. You know, I'm not getting paid for this, by the way. It's a very interesting approach. And I really appreciate what you're trying to do in terms of giving people back their power to care for themselves when things are maybe not optimal and they're really wanting to get better. So, you know, part of that is really making an investment in yourself and really following through. So if you're ready for a New Year's stress reset and, you know, you're trying to figure out who you really are and what's going wrong with your body, you might want to pick up the book, Master Your Stress Reset, Your Health, or, you know, communicate with Dr. Doni back channel. We're going to stop shortly, but maybe we can stop by you kind of helping our listeners learn about things that you think would be really beneficial if they are ready to start a New Year's stress reset.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm sharing with your audience my self-care stress reset so they can get access to this. This is a 7-day video series that I've recorded to help you start taking steps in this direction, because I know that it can feel overwhelming at first. You're like, I know I want to go down this path, but I feel hesitant. I feel overwhelmed. So this 7-day reset is really built in a way that's helping you implement in small steps so that you can actually learn to have more awareness for your body and what it's telling you, learn what works for you as an individual, and start to implement and build a self-care routine for yourself. So the 7-day self-care reset is really perfect for that. And then from there, even if and I work with patients around the world, by the way, so I do work by video, and I have a ton of resources on my website too in terms of master classes and podcasts and blogs. And so please feel free to come visit there and continue to learn. And what you'll also find is a program called the Stress Warrior Program. And so if some of you are like, hey, I'm ready to take the next step, I've got the self-care down, but I really want to learn about my cortisol and my adrenaline and my neurotransmitters and my gut health, and I want to start going more that direction, then I would look at the Stress Warrior Program, because it's something you can do from wherever you are and start to implement these things we're talking about. Even if it's, you know, yes, I am available to do one-on-one consulting as well, but sometimes the Stress Warrior Program is a good place to start down this path, again, to just learning and noticing how your body responds. To me, that's the key, is always just being aware, hey, what feels like the right pace for you to integrate? And then as you go, then you're going to find your way to what I call phase 3, which is the resiliency phase, where you just know, here's what your body needs, especially when you're under more stress. Here's how to help your body recover so that you can maintain more optimal health.
Yeah, I love that, because, you know, when we really start to learn about ourselves, you know, of course, you're going to have days that, you know, maybe they're rougher, you've been exposed to too much, got too many balls in the air, and, you know, you're really feeling offside. You know, you've got tools in your toolkit, and you know how to stabilize and settle your body again and get back on your healthy path. So I'm loving that you're offering everybody the 7-day stress reset. We can put a link on our blog, and when you post the podcast to your blog, you know, for sure, help people with that. We'll just make sure that it gets linked to the blog post that we put up. And it sounds like people can also get in touch with you and reference this this podcast when they listen to it or listen to the live radio show. So I want to thank you so much, Dr. Doni, for the great work that you're doing and the precise way in which you are identifying stress and ways to help people. I'm so grateful for your time. I want to wish to everybody a wonderful 2023 and New Year's, and the same to you as well, Dr. Doni. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Anna. Really appreciate it.
It was really a pleasure, and hopefully we'll have you back again and maybe drill down a little bit further into some of these tests that you're using. And wishing you all a gentle day. Take care of yourself. Be gentle with yourself for 2023, and invest in your own stress reset. Enjoy the day. Be well. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with your host, Dr. Anna Baranowski, right here on Reality Radio 101.